Okay, so as of recently, many people have been talking about and seeing new trailers and new information about the brand new LEGO Batman game, Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. And the game honestly looks pretty good. I mean, it just seems like one giant love letter to all the iterations of the character that we've gotten over the past years. And also, the game looks much different than LEGO games that we've gotten in the past. I mean, the fighting mechanics look different, and they honestly look a lot like Batman Arkham Knight, which is pretty tough. And the roster, other than most LEGO games, is very small. I mean, as of right now, we only know that there's gonna be 7 characters to play as, which might not be a bad thing, but it's just very different from other LEGO games we've gotten in the past. But depending on how this performs, it could be one of the best LEGO games that we've gotten ever. So with that, I thought it would be a good idea to come up with some ideas for some characters that could get LEGO games of their own. One of them being Spider-Man. So with that, let me take y'all on this journey talking about how I would do a LEGO Spider-Man. Now, when you're making a LEGO game, you obviously need mechanics, like fighting, moving, or heck, even communication. So, what kind of mechanics would I personally want in the game? Well, first, let's start off with what everybody wants in Spider-Man games, the swinging. Now, when it comes to the swinging in a Spider-Man game, you need to recognize your audience. Maybe if there's a lot more younger players in the game, you might want to go the old route with the old LEGO game swinging that's slow but also enjoyable. But if there's more older players, like teenagers or adults, you might want to go the new style with the fast swinging from the PS5 games. And I say to that argument, why not both? Literally, just copy and paste the code from both games, put that into the code of this game, and then just have an option to switch between which code you want to follow. Literally, it could be like right under the resume game button in the menu. Now, you might be wondering, why do I say this? Well, obviously, there's going to be more kid players playing the game, right? It's a LEGO game. But there's still going to be older players that want to play the game for nostalgia, right? Then I'll say it again, why not just have both and then be able to switch between it whenever you want? But anyways, next up on mechanics, we have fighting. Honestly, this one's pretty simple. I mean, I would prefer like the Insomniac and the Arkham game fighting. But I mean, again, you could just switch back to normal fighting like the old LEGO games. However, there are 2 mechanics that I need to have in this game. First one's team-ups, obviously. I mean, they're like the definitive fighting for like duos in LEGO games. But the second one is more unique combos.
Get over here!
Now, the combos won't really give you anything. They'll just kind of like help you like fight people quicker. That way, like it doesn't matter that much in the game. So like kids can still play it and like not need to worry about combos. But anyways, moving on from fighting and swinging, we have the last mechanic I want to talk about, which isn't really a mechanic. It's just kind of about the game. Where would this take place? Now, I mean, obviously it's like, you know, gonna take place in New York. That's like the definitive place for Spider-Man. But I mean more like, what universe would this take place in? Now, for this question, there's obviously just 2 solutions. It's either going to take place in the normal LEGO Marvel Superheroes universe or a random new one. And unfortunately, I might have it go as a new one. This isn't because I don't like the LEGO Marvel games. In fact, I actually have a couple video ideas on those games and talking about how good they are. But I'm just saying the story that I have in plan wouldn't really work that well in the universe that's like already built. It's hard to explain. I'll talk about it when I talk about the story. Yo, I need to chill out with my breathing, bro.
Yeah, it's news.
And speaking of talking about the story,
Well, folks, it's about that time and
Yeah, it's news.
Yeah.
yo, what is going on? That's right. It's time to talk about the story. Now, before we get started with this story, I just want you to know that there's going to be a prologue, an epilogue, and then 3 chapters in between. And chapter 1 through 2 isn't really connected, but 2 through 3 is sort of a little bit. You'll see when I talk about it. Anyways, starting with the prologue. Now, the first level of the prologue would be called Along Came a Spider, and you would play as Peter Parker and Harry Osborn. And basically what you do in this level is you just walk around the lab where Spider-Man gets bit and just do some tasks for the scientists. And this level wouldn't be that much except the fact that Peter gets bit at the very end. However, you would get introduced to the puzzle, fighting, and movement mechanics in this level. And it would just get us used to, like, you know, the relationship Peter and Harry have. And then moving on to the next level of the prologue, we have With Great Power. And in this level, it would honestly be a lot like the intro to Spider-Man 1 from 2002. Basically, you play as Uncle Ben and Peter, and then you fight Bonesaw as the first boss fight in the game, and then, you know, it's basically just about like Peter's wrestling days. But in the boss fight with Bonesaw, Uncle Ben would actually get knocked out, and then at the end of the boss fight, Peter wakes him up. He's like, Uncle Ben, are you okay? And Uncle Ben doesn't remember a thing. I mean, because, you know, you need 2-player in a Lego game, and then, like, it'd be kind of weird if he, like, saw him fighting Bonesaw. So it'd be, like, a funny, like, humorous way. Anyways, after that, we have the next level, which is Great Responsibility. And then, sadly, in this level, we would, you know, see the tragic backstory of how Uncle Ben died and Peter faced his killer. And then for the rest of the level, you just play as a cop and Peter chasing down the killer. But anyways, that puts an end to the prologue, and now we're moving on to the first chapter, which is called High School Years. Now, the first level isn't that crazy. You just play as Peter and MJ and go through an ordinary casual day at high school, and you would also establish that, you know, Harry and MJ know about him being Spider-Man. And then the only, like, really, like, interesting thing would probably just be, like, you know, doing, like, puzzle mechanics because it's school, I guess. And then you would fight off a bunch of, like, rogue frogs from a science lab. I don't know, I feel like that would just be, like, funny or something. But anyway, in this next level, we get a bit more of the action as you play as Peter and J. Jonah Jameson at Peter's interview for the Daily Bugle. Now, obviously, you'd move around structures in between levels in free roam, but I actually wouldn't want the entire map of free roam to be available just yet, because there's like different places and different chapters that wouldn't make sense to go into until, you know, you play that part of the chapter. So for now, the only place that would be available for the player is Upper Manhattan. But anyways, going back to the level, Peter and J. Jonah Jameson's interview actually gets interrupted by the Shocker, so you fight alongside JJ and fight against the Shocker as the second boss fight in the game. Anyways, at the end of the Shocker boss fight, you basically just clean up the Daily Bugle and you take one of his gloves home with you. Then we get into our next level, which takes place inside of Peter's house, and you play as Aunt May and Peter. Now, basically, this would kind of just be like a wholesome level as you play as Aunt May and Peter and clean up the house and study the Shocker glove, but, you know, that would just be Peter, because Aunt May actually doesn't know anything about him being Spider-Man yet. But you actually do figure out that the Shocker was working for Kraven the Hunter. So in the next level and free roam, you play as Peter and Harry and fight through a bunch of different groups of hunters that are scattered throughout Upper Manhattan. But after a couple minutes of playing, you figure out that Kraven the Hunter is in an abandoned mansion in the middle of the woods. So out of wanting to protect Harry, you tell him to go home, but then MJ comes along. So in the next level, you play as Spider-Man and MJ, and you sneak through Kraven the Hunter's mansion until you eventually get to him, and right before there's a boss fight, he escapes by the help of Rhino.
Hello there, big gray and ugly. I don't suppose you're here to make a deposit. The name's Rhino. The cash in that there pig's got my name.
But then Rhino runs over MJ. Yeah, I know, it sounds dark, it'd probably look funny in Lego though. And basically you play as Spider-Man and a rebellious server named Eddie.
Yeah, it's news.
Trust me, this will get peak. So basically in the next level you play as who I like to call Server Eddie and Spider-Man, and you fight against Rhino. Also, if you're a little confused, Server Eddie is just like a random server at Kraven the Hunter's party. Don't worry, he becomes a really good character. Eventually though, you do beat him, which is pretty crazy. And after the boss fight, Spider-Man tells Server Eddie to get a less dangerous job, maybe at like Fisk Industries or something. And Server Eddie's like, okay. And then in the next level, you basically just play as Peter and Harry, and you figure out using DNA tracking that Kraven's at Fisk Tower. So then you swing over there, unlocking the main island of Manhattan, except for the west side. If you know what I'm talking about, that's crazy. I don't know how you know that, but tough. And also Brooklyn. Brooklyn isn't unlocked yet. You unlocked Queens, you know, in the earlier level when you did the Aunt May stuff. Anyways, and then basically in the next level, you play as Peter, Harry, and someone who just met up with you, MJ. And you guys sneak through pretty much the like first part of Fisk Tower. And then in the next level, you see Kraven burst through the walls, and there is a boss fight between him, you, and suited up Eddie. That's right, Eddie's back. He took Peter's advice and he's now working for Fisk. But you know, he's taking Peter's side, so he's like, alright, I'll fight Kraven too. And then, you know, MJ's still here. Harry ran away. Yeah.
Well, folks, it's about that time.
Anyways, basically after the fight, you beat him, and then you work your way up the tower to Fisk. Now, MJ is told to hold off the guards while him and Eddie fight the Fisk boss fight. And you know, is it like any ordinary boss fight? You guys win.
W's in the shot. W's in the shot.
Yeah,
And in the very end of the chapter, Peter reveals himself to Eddie out of, because, he seems pretty trustworthy. He's a nice guy. And the chapter ends. On to chapter 2, because I want this video to, not be super hard to... Now, chapter 2 is called College Conundrums, and it takes place a couple months after the events of chapter 1. And the first level is you playing as Peter, Harry, and MJ and doing some tasks in college, and we actually meet Dr. Kurt Connors, wink wink, and a new part of the map opens up, which is Empire State University. Oh, also, there's gonna be interiors for every single building that you've been inside of so far, and I'm pretty sure all throughout the future of this game. So you can go back into Fisk Tower and also Peter's high school. I think that would just be a pretty cool thing, because why waste that all that space? But anyways, the big part of this level would be the discovery of gold bricks. That's right, the #1 item in LEGO games, I think. Again, anyways. In the next level, you play as J. Jonah Jameson, Peter, and photographer Eddie. And basically, the trio just go throughout the city, except for the west part. And you guys just take pictures of things, but then you discover that the Scorpion is attacking Oscorp. And Peter hears this the same time that Norman Osborn walks out of the Daily Bugle, just reading a newspaper. So the both of them, knowing each other because of Harry, go to Oscorp and figure out what the fish is going on. Peter's this is a job for Spider-Man, so he sneaks off, puts his suit on, and then goes to fight the Scorpion alongside Norman Osborn. And then after they defeat him, they ask him, what the fish are you doing, bro? Why are we stealing? And the rest of the level is basically just them, kind of cleaning up Oscorp. But anyways, in the next level, you play as Peter and Harry at Norman Osborn's house, and Norman walks in, he's like, hey, why'd you run off? And Peter's like, oh, I had to get eggs for my aunt. And Norman's like,
yeah, it's
throughout the level, you just play as Peter and Harry and kind of look into the shocker glove and everything. But eventually, Harry gets electrocuted and then knocked out. Then in the next level, Harry wakes up in a hospital bed, and him and MJ, or Peter and MJ, are just chilling next to him, just talking to him. And then Aunt May leans over and does a little prayer over him, and then she blows up.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us.
I'm not, I don't know why that would just be so funny. And the person that actually caused the explosion would be Electro. So then throughout the level, you basically just have a boss fight between MJ, Peter, and then they're fighting Electro. But then it's actually discovered that Electro caused a citywide blackout. He also escaped. And then in the next level, you play as Peter and Kurt Connors, and you basically just kind of look into how Electro got his powers. And it's discovered that Kurt Connors is actually doing some experiments on lizards, but Peter doesn't think much of it. But anyways, after that, in the next level, you play as Peter and Eddie, and you kind of go throughout the city and try and fix the blackout. Eventually, it doesn't work though. But in this level, you actually see the Scorpion, who escaped from prison recently, trying to rob Oscorp again. So Eddie and Peter are like, alright, let's go stop him real quick. And you do, with, another Scorpion boss fight. But then Spider-Man's like, alright, buddy, who sent you and everything like that? And right before he answers, he's actually shot with a tranquilizer dart. So then the guy that shot him, who appears to be in green and purple robes on rooftops, Peter and Eddie chase. But that is only after Peter and Eddie discover a black goop that Scorpion was trying to steal. So Peter puts the black goop in his pocket, and then they start to go after the guy in robes. But eventually, Electro shows up and stops them from chasing him and knocks Eddie onto a nearby street. But Peter, knowing that, he has to focus on the mission right now, just leaves him behind. This is where villains are made. Remember how his name is Eddie? Anyways, in the cutscene, you actually run through the western parts of Manhattan. But then Peter gets knocked out by Electro too. Well, there's no heroes to help them. What are they gonna do? A man in red lands on the rooftop. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Daredevil has entered the chat.
Yeah, it is.
You also unlock Hell's Kitchen, which is the western part of Manhattan. See, this is what I'm working at, people. And then the final level of this chapter is basically you and Daredevil fighting against Electro. And boom, that puts an end to chapter 2, which leads us into chapter 3, which actually doesn't, it takes place a week after chapter 2. Anyways, the first level of chapter 3 is you playing as Peter, Dr. Kurt Connors, and MJ. And Peter doesn't say that, he, as Spider-Man, he got the black goop, but basically they, like, look through the black goop and, like, study it and everything. And in the process, the black goop actually bonds to Peter. And when he is about to leave Dr. Kirk Connors, because he's like, I'll find a way on how to, like, take it off of you in a little bit. Peter's like, and he's like, yeah. And he's like, and he's like,
yeah, it's news.
yeah. And he's like, okay. But anyways, right as Peter's about to swing away, the black goop kind of forms around his Spider-Man suit, and we get W's in the chat. Anyways, in the next level, you go looking for Eddie in free roam, and you actually find him, and the next level, you play as him and Eddie, and just fight off some, like, random thugs in the street that were trying to beat up Eddie. But after the fight, Eddie's like, you left me behind. And Peter's like, I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have done that. And he's like, it's alright. That's a nice suit you got there, too. And basically, it's a wholesome moment of just showing, like, how W of a friend Eddie is. And then in the next level, you play as Peter and a newly recovered Harry. And you guys look through certain documents inside of Oscorp to figure out who hired the Scorpion. And the reason why they figure out it was probably someone in Oscorp was, the purple and green clothes and, like, purple and green. It sounds stupid, but it'd probably be pretty funny. But eventually it's revealed that Norman, because the thing that he was trying to steal, aka the black goop, was like, pretty mysterious, but it was actually a component he needed to figure out what he likes to call the G serum, aka the Goblin serum, which would basically make him like have like super strength and stuff. But because he wasn't able to get that factor from the goop, he also has side effects from that. And he's basically going insane. Then in the next level, you play as Peter and Daredevil. And you guys basically just fight through Hell's Kitchen and try to find out where the Goblin is. Eventually fighting him, and there's like this little short boss fight, but it's nothing that crazy. It's basically just like for like a tease of the final boss fight. But also throughout these levels, we've seen Peter get like kind of angry, but like it's not like, he's like shouting or anything. He's just like getting a bit more edgier, and he's like, it might be the suit. So he decides to take off the suit and, put it back in his pocket. But then in the next level, like I was saying, he meets up with Eddie, and the suit actually shoots out from his pocket and goes on to Eddie. And the Venom is born. I know that was very quick and just like randomly happened, but trust me, it would be like a lot like, slower in the game. This video is like probably so long right now. Wait, let me check. Oh my goodness. Anyways, with this, Eddie's willpower isn't as strong as Peter's, so he turns into Venom and we get a Venom boss fight. And then eventually the boss fight leads into the next level, which is basically you playing as Peter and Daredevil. And Peter like talks to Eddie and he's like, apologizing if he feels sorry. And Eddie's just like, man, do you appreciate me? And Peter's like, yes. So Eddie becomes good, but he still has Venom. But then the Green Goblin comes out of nowhere and attacks Spider-Man, and he's like, at last I have found the goop. And then Venom slams him across the city. So then the Green Goblin is like, alright then, let's do this. So then that leads us into our final level of the game, which is a boss fight with you playing as Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Venom, and you fight against the Green Goblin. Ooh! This would be so bussin'. And then this would be like a 3-section boss fight. Like there'd be multiple fighting sections and then, chasing sections. It would just be like really fun. And then eventually you beat him. And you and Eddie become good friends again. Daredevil's like, yo, what's up, bro? And Peter's like, yo, what's up?
Yeah, it's news.
And then that leads us into our prologue, which isn't like the epilogue. Or no, I'm sorry, I'm mixing them up. The epilogue, which isn't like the prologue. But basically it kind of like settles everything. It like, leaves gaps that were still open. And that puts an end to the story of the custom Lego Spider-Man game. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be, like, the complete end of the story, but, I mean, I would definitely want there to be DLCs, number one being the Lizard. I would also want all DLCs to be free, but then the next one would probably be a DLC adding on Miles Morales or something like that. I think that would be cool, and the main villain would probably be, Doc Ock. But yeah, let me know what some ideas that you have for a Spider-Man game are down in the comments, or maybe you'd like to continue this. Let me know some ideas for DLCs. But with that, I hope all of you enjoyed this video. I hope all of you have a nice day or night. Jesus is King, and I will see y'all in the next one.